It looks like we won the die roll here, so we're gonna have the initiative in terms of playing first, which is nice. This hand seems fine. We're gonna keep it. We want to definitely hit a threat off this oath so we can have some early action. And we're hoping that these Dromoka's commands end up being good. It depends, though, what type of deck our opponent's is playing. We do have a land we can reveal with the Fortified Village. So let's see what this Oath of Nissa is going to provide for us. So this wasn't really what we wanted to see. Den Protector isn't a card we really want to play on turn 2. I think we're going to take the land. We have a 5-drop, and the land is going to help us if we draw something like a Gideon. But we could also take the Den Protector. I think it's very close here. Alright, let's try the Den Protector. Could come come back to bite us. What we really wanted was a Planeswalker, a Sylvan or any 2-drop, basically. We did not see any of those. And now we have Chandra, which we're pretty far from being able to cast. So, the question becomes, do we want to just go ahead and play this Den Protector face up this turn? Or wait and play it face down? We can play it face up and attempt to trade with this Expedition Envoy. So let's just do that. It's not the greatest. We're going to hope to draw something we can cast on our next turn. Against the aggressive humans deck, you want to just be saving as much damage as possible. It looks like our opponent has a bunch of 2/1s still, and we basically bricked. This Canopy Vista was not what we wanted. So that means a ton of damage is going to be coming across now. If our opponent has a Thalia's Lieutenant, that would be 6 total. But it's going to be 4. So hopefully our opponent doesn't have a big follow-up here. Alright, Thraben Inspector. So we're still live in the game if that's the follow-up. But alright, so we really want to draw a 2-drop here. Okay, Hangerback Walker is a 2-drop. So we can play the Hangerback for 1, which we want to do here, and then hold up Dromoka's command. So we're just going to pass the turn. We don't need to fire off the command right now. We can wait and see what our opponent does as far as their attacks before deciding on the Dromoka's command. So it looks like our opponent's just playing an Expedition Envoy out, and now here's Thalia's Lieutenant, which is very bad news. We were pretty much hoping that this was not a card our opponent had in their hand. Unfortunately, though, our opponent has cast the Thalia's Lieutenant, so the Council's Lieutenant is the card we care about the most. We basically have the option of using our Dromoka's command now, getting rid of the Council's Lieutenant, making 2/1/1s, and blocking. Or we can block first, and then Dromoka's Command, leaving ourselves with 2/1/1 flyers and taking the same amount of damage. So I think I like blocking first. So we're just going to block one of the 3/2 creatures. And then Dromoka's Command, getting rid of the Council's Lieutenant. So we are going to get 2 Thopters here and take 5. We're not completely dead, but we're definitely on the back foot. Let's see what our draw step is. Alright, it's a Nissa. So, not the best, but not the worst draw. We can play it, and then we can minus it. So, these Thopters become better blockers. Now, if our opponent does have something like a Declaration in Stone, another Thalia's Lieutenant, or a variety of other spells, we're going to be in bad shape. If our opponent has nothing at all, we still have, we still have a chance at least. But we'll see what the play is going to be here. Okay, Kithian, that's going to boost up the Thalia's Lieutenant. And looks like it might even be a Griffspoon. So this would have us taking 8, falling down to 3. But we'll see what our opponent decides to do exactly. It's definitely not looking good. Because, when your draw isn't great and you're playing against a human stack that curves out at 3 lands, finishing at 3 lands, and the rest spells, it's normally bad news. So the attack is just coming all at us, which makes sense. The play is just going to be to save as much damage as possible, I think. Alter. So yeah, that's what we're going to do. We're going to fall down to 3 here. And yeah, that's not going to do it. So let's see what our sideboard has. We want to be boarding in these Wrath effects, like Tragic and Linvala is also good. We just want to be making our deck pretty lean. Den Protector isn't necessarily what we want to be doing, so we can board those out just because we are going to normally have a better late game than our opponent. We can also take out Secure. Hangerback is okay in this matchup. It's not great. We do want Silk Wrap. We want this other Declaration. Avacyn is another card that is fine, but we already have a bunch of 5-drops, so we can shave on those. And then the question becomes, how do we feel as far as Lambholt Pacifist versus Hangerback Walker? On the draw, I definitely think we want Pacifist. On the play, it's a little bit more interesting. And so I think we want the Hangerbacks on the play. And the Chandra is fine just because we can potentially Wrath our opponent with it. But it's also a 6-drop, which we have to keep in mind. But our deck's pretty good on the play. So we're just going to keep this configuration. And, alright, let's see what we got here. It's a Hangerback Walker draw. We don't currently have the green for Nissa yet. We have one green only. The reason why I like Hangerback more on the play is because with Dramoka's command, being able to level it and then fight is pretty important. It also does trade with these 1 toughness creatures. So we're just going to play it out. And it will be interesting to see if our opponent elects to attack with the Envoy into the Hangerback Walker. Or this may just be a removal spell, but no, it's actually a Militia Captain. And just passing the turn. So the more conservative approach, I would say, there from our opponent. And now we have the land for Nissa. So I think we want to go ahead and just get Nissa onto the board. If our opponent has Athalia's Lieutenant, it is going to make our blocks tougher. But it looks like it's just going to be attacking with the Militia Captain, so we're fine with just chumping that attack. Okay, Knight of the White Orchid, that makes sense. And we're going to get to choose exactly how we deal with these creatures our opponent has. We have Declaration, which could take care of these envoys if we want to go that direction. I think we actually want to just get rid of this Militia Captain right now. So let's do that with a Silk Wrap. We want to save the Dramoka's command in case of always watching. And we don't need to play this Oath right now. So let's just hold up the Dramoka's command and pass. So it looks like our opponent's drawn some more lands this game, which is good news for us. And there is a Stasis Snare. Alright, so now we have Dramoka's command, which we can use in response to this Stasis Snare. And then essentially fizzle the Stasis Snare itself. So let's go ahead and do that. We are gonna put a +1/+1 counter on probably our Hangerback. There is definitely an argument to putting the counter on the plant, though. So between those options, yeah, I think we still want to put it on the Hangerback Walker. So we're going to have our opponent sacrifice that Stasis Snare and get a counter here. So that basically fizzles the Stasis Snare completely. Our Hangerback doesn't leave play at all, so we still have the 2 counters on it. And it looks like our opponent's gearing up for a big attack on our Nissa. So we're okay with blocking an Expedition Envoy here and chumping one of the other creatures, I think. We are going to get 2 Thopters out of the deal, which is pretty nice. And it looks like the follow-up is going to be a Council's Lieutenant. And we drew Tragic Arrogance. Okay. So let's start with an Oath to see what we can find. And it looks like the options are Westvale Abbey to basically set up Tragic Arrogance, or we could just take a Gideon, which is also pretty strong. I think we just want the Gideon. And so now the question becomes, do we want to use the Declaration in stone? And there's definitely a reasonable argument for doing so here. We can just get this Council's Lieutenant off the table. So, yeah, I mean we're not getting a 2-for-1 with our Declaration, but the Lieutenant is one of the more annoying cards. And we don't really need to attack at all here. The reason why I don't like attacking is if our opponent plays a pump spell like a Always Watching or Lieutenant, we want to be able to double block the Envoy with both of our Thopters. So we'll see what happens, but if we don't draw another land, we're just going to play Gideon. And if we do, we have the option of Tragic Arrogance if we want to. But we're not under too much pressure to cast it as of right now. And it looks like just more attacks coming at our Nissa. So, just a pretty easy block for us. And there's some reinforcements. Kithian is pretty annoying here. We could Tragic Arrogance now just to get rid of essentially 2 of our opponent's creatures. And that's an option for sure. Not sure it's our best option though. I think we just want to play Gideon. If we do have to Tragic Arrogance, we can always make an emblem with Gideon first before doing so. So that Gideon doesn't die. Like, we're not going to sacrifice one of our Planeswalkers when we cast Tragic Arrogance. We also have to be worried about Declaration in terms of committing too many of the same token onto the board. Right now we're happy we have 3 different tokens in play. So it may be that our opponent just wants to attack with Kithian and the Knight of the White Orchid. And that's fine. So here we could just make an emblem with Gideon and then cast our Tragic Arrogance. That play seems pretty reasonable. Yeah, I think I like that play. Let's do that. And so we're just going to allow our opponent to keep the inspector, the 3-man inspector. So, of course, we're going to end up sacrificing our Oath of Nissa because we're going to keep our Silk Wrap in play. And now all of our plants are going to be 1/2 creatures, which is pretty nice. We have the option here of whether to attack with the knight. I think it's fine to attack. If our opponent does play a pump spell or something, that's a little bit annoying, but not the end of the world. Okay, there's going to be a Griff Spoon, so that's going to be a way of pressuring our Nissa. But not too worried about it right now. So let's just go ahead and play this freshly drawn Oath. Did not really find anything, unfortunately. But the 6th land does make our Sylvan Advocate bigger, which is definitely nice. Maybe our opponent's going to just trade the Dragon Hunter for the plant, but it looks like no. So we're just going to play the rest of our hand out. Next turn, we may want to consider minusing the Gideon to pump up our squad. But you can see how this emblem is really making these plants legitimate threats. Thalia's Lieutenant is pretty good, but we're still pretty far ahead here. So I think we just want to cash our Nissa in. We're going to minus it and just bash with everything. Our opponent doesn't have any great blocks here. The Dragon Hunter can trade with the plant, and the Thalia's Lieutenant can trump the Advocate. That's what I would expect. Or just taking 8 and falling to 5, I guess, is the other option, which is what our opponent has elected to do. I would expect these attacks from the Thraben Inspector to stop now. But our opponent's still going to need to have drawn something here. We'll see if that is the case. Okay, Dragon Hunter. So, alright, Avacyn's a nice draw for us. I think we still want to just turn our guys sideways. The Inspector can eat a plant. But, yeah, I mean, there's not really any great blocks. We can also just cast our Avacyn here, so that none of our creatures are going to die here in combat. So we're just going to go ahead and do that. Not really picturing any draws our opponent's going to have. And so it's going to be game 3. So I do like the Pacifist more on the draw than the Hangerback Walker. Our Planeswalkers also get worse on the draw. So we may want to consider cutting some Planeswalkers as well. So let's see what our deck looks like with the Pacifists in. We can afford to cut one of each of these Planeswalkers. Bring in one more Archangel. We already have brought in our 4 copies of Lambholt Pacifists. And then one Stasis Snare is pretty reasonable as well. So this is the configuration I think we want to be running on the draw. So let's try it. So here we do have Oath and Chandra and Nissa. We're going to keep, but the hand is still a little bit slow. We want to draw a 2-drop. We also want some sort of removal or mass removal even, which we don't have in hand. It looks like our opponent is playing red. I don't believe we've seen red lands up to this point. Could be wrong, but not remembering them, so that's pretty interesting to see Battlefield Forge. And we're just going to grab this Lambholt Pacifist. Being able to play it on turn 2 is nice. Our opponent can flip Gossipmonger, but hopefully then we would be able to block the Gossipmonger with the Pacifist, but Gossipmonger is just really nice. Like, if our opponent has any creature here and follows that up with a Stasis Snare, and actually, sorry, not a Stasis Snare, but a Thalia's Lieutenant, but it looks like it's just a 1-land hand from our opponent, but Anointer of Champions is going to make this Gossipmonger into a legitimate attacking threat. So here we have the option between Sylvan Advocate and Pacifist, and that decision is actually relatively close. I think we might actually want to play the Advocate now. The reason being is we can't profitably block the Gossipmonger with the Pacifist. And so the Advocate can at least attack potentially next turn. Whereas the Pacifist might not be able to. But that decision was definitely close. Not sure we made the right decision in terms of which 2-drop to play. So, yep, that's going to be 3 damage coming through. And it could just be another bear. It's actually Kithian. So, our draw is Dramoka's Command. So now we have a couple different plays we can make here. The question becomes, do we want to cast this Dramoka's Command? Or just cast Nissa for our turn? And I think the decision is pretty close. But still leaning towards just playing Nissa and plussing. Just because mana efficiency wise, we're going to be able to Pacifist and Command on our next turn. Now, it's definitely possible our opponent has something like a Griffspoon or removal and is able to just take out our Nissa. But that's going to be pretty hard to just play around for the entire game. Yep, okay, it's Griffspoon, so if Nissa hits the bin here, which it looks like is going to be the case, it's not the end of the world. Playing Pacifist plus Dramoka's Command is still going to be a nice turn for us. So, we have a couple options in terms of how we want to use the Dramoka's Command. We can make our Pacifist into a bigger threat. I think we want to take care of this Incited Rabble either way. So I think making the Pacifist into a 4/4 is likely the best way of doing this. The other option is to plan on blocking the Incited Rabble, and making our opponent sacrifice an enchantment, But that doesn't seem as good. So let's just go ahead and attack with Sylvan Advocate here. There's no real reason to hold off. We might as well just go ahead and do it. The reason why we want to put the counter on the pacifist is so that itself can attack. Being that now it's a 4-4, potentially it's going to become a 5-5 if our opponent does nothing, which I wouldn't expect. It is definitely possible our opponent has something like a declaration for the pacifist, but even that we're fine with. We're still moving towards being able to cast Chandra in 2 turns. So this game is definitely in our favor right now. And also our opponent's been taking damage from Battlefield Forge this whole time. So they're actually in danger of dying quite quickly. One of the problems with playing a deck that plays so few lands is that the amount of times you are just going to have 1 land is actually a reasonable amount of the time, and we're seeing it here. So it looks like our opponent may just be throwing in the towel. I mean, I don't think we're gonna we would lose this game if it proceeded, no matter what our opponent has, and looks like it's just gonna be a concession.